Very good morning, everybody. It's a beautiful morning in Ballycastle. My name is Petra. I'm a tourist guide, and I have been asked by Causeway, and Glens Council to help with the walking tours of the main towns in the council area. That is Ballycastle, Ballymoney, Coleraine and Limavady. So now we're starting off in the beautiful seafront town of Ballycastle. Ballycastle has quite some history. If you look around now, you will not be able to imagine what a busy industrial town it was at one stage. In the 1700s, there was a lot of industries in the town, pretty much founded by one man. His name was Hugh Boyd. If you look up to Fairhead, not far from Fairhead, there were coal mines. Ballycastle had coal mines. Yes, you heard correctly. One of only two coal mines in the whole of Northern Ireland, the other one being in Coal Island. And those mines were quite productive. They even supplied the city of London with coal for a while. And in order to ship the coal, the harbour here in the town had to be improved because the original harbour tended to silt up, and that was very inconvenient for the larger ships to come in. So the River Margie, which you can see here in the background under the Margie Bridge, the River Margie had to be rerouted in order to facilitate the building of a new harbour. And that is where you see the tennis courts today. If you look at the tennis courts, there's a wall around the tennis courts, and that used to be the harbour wall, believe it or not. So there was coal mining going on in Ballycastle. Not far from the coal mines, there were salt pans. Seawater was taken from the sea and then dried out, which left the salt. There was a candle works because the people in the coal mine needed light. There were breweries in the town, and what do breweries need? They need bottles, so a glass works was created right here on this beach. There was tanneries, and also the proximity to the sea helped because kelp was taken from the sea, and people had found out that kelp is very good for the bleaching of linen. So there was a bleach screen, and there was an enormous amount of industry. After the death of Hugh Boyd, the industries, which was pretty much the work of this one man, then started to decline. And today it is a very pretty, very quiet seaside town. We're here at the Ballycastle beach. An earlier settlement was by the local chieftains. A gentleman called Sorely Boy MacDonald built a castle at the coast a little bit further up from here, and there is only remains left of the castle. The town is called Ballycastle. Bally meaning a town, and castle meaning castle. The Irish is Ballia an Cashlawn. And if you look around the town, you will find there isn't a castle. Well, they haven't renamed the town. It's not called Ballycastle, although that might well be more appropriate. So there is nothing left of the castle today. If you look out by the sea, you can see behind Fairhead, you can see the Mull of Kintyre, which is in Scotland. It's only about 20 miles from here to Scotland, and a little bit more in a westerly direction you have the only inhabited island in Northern Ireland, that is Roughland Island. The present harbour dates back to 1997, and it had, for a while, there was a ferry going over to Campbelltown on the Mull of Kintyre, but that didn't run very long. Today the harbour is mainly used by the users of the marina and by the ferry to Roughland Island for the people of the island and any visitors. Whenever Sorely Boy MacDonald built his castle, this wasn't actually much of a town. It wasn't known as Ballycastle because his castle only gave it its name. It was known as Port Britas. And there was a little settlement at the Margie that was known as Margie Town. The name Ballycastle came later after the castle was built. So, after the start of this lovely soft beach here, we'll take a little walk around the seafront, and I'll recommend a few other places for you to go. The walk around the seafront is very short, but I recommend you go into the town afterwards and take in the sights of the town as well. So now I want to tell you about a gentleman who came to Ballycastle to do some very innovative experiments. He was doing a radio broadcast, the first transmission of a radio signal across a distance, and he chose Ballycastle because he could pick the distance across the sea to the island of Rathlin. That's about 4 miles. The gentleman was called Marconi, Guglielmo Marconi, and you might have guessed from the name he was an Italian gentleman, but he had roots here in Ireland. If you want to take up a little walk up North Street, you can see the hill. There is a car park and there is a plaque to Marconi, and that was the spot where he sent his radio signal in 1898. And from there, the rest is history. We've just walked up a little bit from the seafront, and I want to tell you about another feature outside Ballycastle, that is Bonamargy Friary. That is a Franciscan friary founded just before 1500. You remember the bridge over the Margie? If you go across the bridge and a few more minutes along the road, on the other side you will find the very picturesque ruins of Bonamargy Friary. I can only recommend going there. It is a nice sight. As I say, the friary dates back to just before 1500s, and it was founded by the Franciscans, but it doesn't last very long, because in 1530, under Henry VIII, a lot of monasteries were dissolved, and Bonamargy was one of those. It later got into the possession of the MacDonald family. You heard about that family before. There's a few stories around Bonamargy. There was a black nun, Julia McQuillan, and her ghost is said to haunt the town to this day. Julia McQuillan was she's buried at Bonamargy Friary, and she was also well known for her predictions. At one stage she predicted a red-haired priest would come to Ballycastle and die. And just before 1900s, a red-haired priest came up from Belfast, and it was a very nice calm day, so he decided to take a swim in the sea, and he drowned. Another one of her predictions is that the mountain behind me, Knocklade, she said it would erupt. It would be a volcanic eruption of Knocklade mountain. The mountain is not a volcano, but there was a hoax in the newspapers. They reported an eruption of Knocklade, and they said that flows of lava had come out of the mountain, and they flowed down the hill, and they wreaked havoc with the animals, and then they flowed to Fairhead, which would have meant they had to flow uphill. But not only that was invented, the whole story turned out to be a hoax. Knocklade itself, you can see its shape. It's called the Broad Mountain. The word Knocklade means the Broad Mountain. It is not a volcano, but it is the backdrop to the town, and you can see it from many places in Ballycastle. And we've walked up a little bit more. If you're looking around the seafront in Ballycastle, you cannot help but notice the beautiful statue of the children of Lear. These are 4 swans, and there's a moving story behind those 4 swans. The story is the story of the children of Lear. A long time ago, there was a king called Lear, and he had 4 children, a daughter, Fionnuala, and 3 sons. And unfortunately, when the children were young, their mother died. They missed her very much, and the king realised that they did need a mother, so he decided to marry again. The High King sent him a member of his family. She was called Aoife, and she was beautiful, but she wasn't as kind-hearted as Lear had initially thought. She loved the children very much to begin with, but then she started to become jealous because the king loved the children more than he loved her, and she couldn't have that, so she wanted to get rid of the children. She took them a walk to Loch Derravara, near where they lived, and when they were swimming, she cast a druid's wand and she cast a spell on them. All of a sudden, there were not 4 children swimming in the water, there were 4 swans swimming in the water. One of the swans, with Fionnuala's voice, asked, "What have you done?" And she cackled and she says, "I have cast a spell on you. You will live here in Loch Derravara for 300 years, then you will have to move on to the Sea of Moyle, and then you will go to Inish Glór for 300 more years." And she left. She went home. The king was surprised that she came back home without the children, and the children didn't come home, so eventually he asked her what had happened, and she didn't say anything, so he went to the lake, and he was very surprised to see 4 swans swimming towards him, and one of them speaking to him with Fionnuala's voice. And she said, "Aoife has cast a spell on us, and she has turned us into swans, Daddy." And Daddy was very sad. He went home. He tried to convince Aoife to take the spell back, but she wouldn't do it. And so they had to live in the water as swans. The father was very, very sad. He spent the rest of his life going to the lake every day and talking to the swans. And one day he died, and the children were very sad. 300 years were over. The swans felt the urge to lift off to the skies, and they flew to the Sea of Moyle, just behind me here. Very cold, very rough conditions, not a good time for the swans. They lived here for 300 years, as the spell had predicted, and then they moved on to Inishglore. It was a bit warmer on the island, so it was easier for them. There was plenty of food. And another 300 years passed. The spell had said that it could only be broken when a church bell was heard ringing, and one day they heard just that. And they turned back into people. But of course, it being 900 years later, they were very old people. Fionnuala took her arms, she put them round her brothers, they went to the church, they were baptised, and they died. So that is the very sad story of the children of Lear. So I hope you enjoyed our walk around the seafront of Ballycastle. It's not a very big walk, but in this small area you can see a lot of history of the town. If you take another walk from here across the bridge to Bonamargy, that'll take you about 15, maybe 20 minutes. You can explore that. If you go the other way, you can go and see the town itself. The most interesting feature in the town is the church in the diamond and the fountain in the diamond. By the way, the church in the diamond was rebuilt from the stones from the castle that isn't there anymore. And a little bit up from the diamond you will find Ballycastle Museum, but make sure that you know the opening times because they vary a lot these days. So thank you very much for your interest, and I hope you have a good time when you move on to the next town.